The Vietnam War is often remembered through grainy footage and political fallout. But beyond the headlines lies something far more haunting: the raw, personal stories of those who lived through it. This isn't a history lesson about battle plans or foreign policy. This is about people, civilians caught in the crossfire, soldiers broken by what they saw and what they did. These aren't just moments in time. They're emotional scars that still bleed. Today, we're uncovering the hidden heartbreak of Vietnam, the untold truths, the silent suffering, the legacy that still lingers. These are the stories that must be heard. March 16th, 1968. The quiet hamlets of My Lai and My Khe in Quang Nguoi Province, South Vietnam, became the site of one of the most horrific war crimes in American military history. What began as Operation Muscatine, a search and destroy mission, was intended to eliminate a suspected stronghold of Viet Cong guerrillas. Instead, US soldiers from Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, found no armed resistance. What they encountered were unarmed civilians, men, women, elderly, and over 170 children, many of them infants. Still, under the pressure of rising American casualties, vague intelligence, and an atmosphere poisoned by fear and dehumanization, the troops unleashed hell. Over a brutal span of 4 hours, more than 500 civilians were systematically murdered, shot, and mutilated. The massacre wasn't a tragic accident of war. It was intentional. While some soldiers followed orders blindly, others refused to participate or tried to stop the killing. Most notably, Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson Jr., a helicopter pilot, was horrified by what he witnessed from the air. He landed his chopper between the civilians and the advancing troops, even ordering his crew to open fire on their fellow Americans if they continued the slaughter. He helped evacuate several villages, saving their lives. Yet, for more than a year, the US military attempted to conceal the atrocity, initially reporting it as a successful operation. The truth came to light only because of Ron Riddenhauer, a former soldier who gathered testimonies and sent letters to Congress. In 1969, journalist Seymour Hersh broke the story to the world. The revelations sparked outrage across the globe. Only one soldier, Lieutenant William Calley, was convicted, found guilty of murdering 22 villagers. He served just 3 years under house arrest. For many, this was seen as a grotesque failure of justice. My Lai became a haunting symbol of how war can erode morality, of the dangers of blind obedience, and of the catastrophic cost of dehumanizing the enemy. It shattered the US military's credibility and deepened anti-war sentiment back home, forever altering how the Vietnam War would be remembered. During the Vietnam War, the US military launched Operation Ranch Hand, a massive herbicidal warfare campaign. From 1962 to 1971, aircraft sprayed over 20 million gallons of defoliants across South Vietnam, intended to strip away jungle cover, expose enemy movements, and destroy crops thought to be feeding the Viet Cong. But one of these defoliants, Agent Orange, had devastating consequences. It wasn't just a weed killer. It contained dioxin TCDD, a highly toxic contaminant, and one of the most lethal synthetic chemicals known to science. Over 4.5 million Vietnamese people were potentially exposed. For them, the war never ended. The consequences were, and are, catastrophic. Vietnamese civilians and soldiers developed cancers, reproductive disorders, and skin diseases. Children were born with severe birth defects, cleft palates, missing limbs, and neurological damage. The environmental toll is ongoing. Soil remains poisoned, and ecosystems disrupted beyond recovery. For many, even today, farming is impossible in once thriving regions. And the damage didn't stop at Vietnam's borders. More than 2.8 million US veterans were potentially exposed to Agent Orange. Many later suffered from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, prostate cancer, Parkinson's disease, and a range of other debilitating conditions. The US government only slowly acknowledged the long-term health effects. And even today, thousands of veterans still fight for recognition and medical support. Perhaps the most haunting legacy is genetic. Dioxin exposure is now linked to transgenerational harm, passed from parent to child. Birth defects continue to appear decades later in both Vietnamese populations and among the descendants of exposed veterans. Agent Orange was never just a military tactic. It was an invisible, enduring weapon. A chemical shadow cast across generations. Its victims spanned continents and lifetimes, making it the war that never ended. Not in the jungles, not in the bodies, and not in the bloodlines. April 30th, 1975. The day South Vietnam's capital fell, marking the official end of the Vietnam War. But for those trapped in Saigon, it was the beginning of a chaotic, traumatic exodus. As North Vietnamese tanks rolled into the city, fear spread like wildfire. For weeks, rumors of the approaching communist forces had stirred panic. But in the final hours, chaos became reality. Thousands of South Vietnamese civilians, political allies, military personnel, embassy workers and their families rushed to the US Embassy, hoping for rescue. Operation Frequent Wind, the largest helicopter evacuation in history, was underway. Over 7,000 people were airlifted from rooftops as American forces made their final retreat. Iconic images emerged, helicopters hovering over the US Embassy, people climbing ladders to reach departing choppers, others clinging to landing skids in desperation. Entire families were separated. Parents passed children to US Marines, praying they'd survive. Others stayed behind, forced to choose between risking execution or hiding in fear. When the last helicopter left, hundreds were still stranded at the gates, abandoned, betrayed, and heartbroken. But the fall of Saigon wasn't just the fall of a city. It was the collapse of a nation and the shattering of an identity. More than 130,000 Vietnamese refugees fled in the months that followed, beginning a massive diaspora. Many became known as the boat people, escaping by sea under dangerous conditions. They arrived in countries like the United States, Canada, and Australia with no belongings, no language skills, and deep psychological scars. The trauma was generational. For many, exile meant starting over with nothing, haunted by the guilt of surviving, the pain of separation, and the fear of what became of those left behind. The images and stories from that day endure as a stark reminder. War does not end with silence. It echoes across lifetimes. Deep in the jungles of North Vietnam and Laos, hundreds of American servicemen vanished behind enemy lines. Prisoners of war, caught in a shadow conflict that extended far beyond the battlefield. Beaten, starved, shackled in solitary confinement. They were held in notorious camps like Hoa Lo Prison, infamously nicknamed the Hanoi Hilton. Conditions were brutal. Torture techniques included rope bindings, stress positions, beatings, and psychological torment. Many were denied medical care and suffered untreated wounds and disease. Communication was forbidden, but they found ways. Using tap codes on walls, cough signals, or secret notes hidden in clothing, prisoners built a fragile brotherhood, a lifeline in a world designed to break them. One of the most well-known POWs, Senator John McCain, was held for over 5 years. Like many, he refused early release, adhering to the military code of conduct to not accept freedom before fellow prisoners. That silent act of defiance came at a painful cost, but it became a symbol of unity and resistance. In total, over 700 American POWs were captured, but not all returned. And questions remain. Did others remain in captivity long after the war ended? Were some left behind? When the war ended and POWs were released during Operation Homecoming in 1973, many expected a hero's welcome. But instead, they were met with national fatigue and political silence. The public, weary from years of conflict and scandal, struggled to fully comprehend the depth of their sacrifice, and the trauma didn't stop at the prison gates. Many former POWs faced PTSD, survivor's guilt, and a healthcare system unprepared to support them. Some carried their scars, visible and invisible, for the rest of their lives. These aren't just tales of suffering. They are stories of grit, resilience, and the human spirit refusing to break, but also of a country that too often forgot to listen. Not all wounds bleed. For tens of thousands of Vietnam veterans, the war didn't end with the last bullet or the fall of Saigon. It came home with them, lodged deep in their minds. What they brought back wasn't always visible. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, depression, anxiety, and survivors' guilt became the hidden scars of their service. The term PTSD wasn't even recognized by the American Psychiatric Association until 1980, 5 years after the war ended, leaving many veterans undiagnosed, misunderstood, and untreated for years. Some endured vivid flashbacks, night terrors, emotional numbness, or violent outbursts, often without knowing why. Reintegration was brutal. Veterans returned to a country divided by the war, not united in support. Instead of welcome home parades, many were met with hostility. Branded as baby killers or agents of a failed mission, they were spat on, ignored, and alienated from the very society they fought for. Unemployment rates among Vietnam vets were higher than national averages. Many struggled to hold jobs or maintain relationships. Divorce rates and substance abuse skyrocketed. Entire families bore the emotional fallout. Spouses, children, even grandchildren, all affected by trauma that was never fully addressed. It wasn't until decades later that public attitudes began to shift. The creation of readjustment counseling services through the VA, Veterans Affairs, and the establishment of vet centers helped thousands begin to confront the mental toll of war. But even today, an estimated 11 to 30% of Vietnam veterans continue to experience PTSD at some point in their lives. Behind every uniform was a person, a son, a daughter, a friend, trying to survive survival. Mental health care isn't just important, it's essential. And for many veterans, it's the difference between enduring silence and finally being heard. These aren't just stories from the past. They're warnings, reminders, please. From jungles poisoned by Agent Orange, to the streets of Saigon swallowed by fear, to the veterans still tormented by what they saw. This is the true cost of Vietnam. We owe it to the fallen, the survivors, the silenced. Not just to remember the war, but to remember the people. If these stories moved you, help us keep them alive. Like the video, subscribe for more Untold history, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and stay curious.